Today we have a hearing entitled Terminations of Individual Health Policies by Insurance Companies. The chairman, the ranking member, and the chairman emeritus will have 5 minutes for opening statement. Other members of the subcommittee will be recognized for 3 minutes. Before we begin, I'm going to ask unanimous consent that the contents of our document binder be entered into the record, provided that the committee staff may redact any information that is business proprietary, relates to privacy concerns, or is law enforcement sensitive. Without objection, the documents will be entered into the record, and we'll ask that a copy of our document binder be placed at the front table in case witnesses wish to refer to it. I'm going to begin opening statement. I'll start with my opening statement for 5 minutes. Every night across America, more than 45 million Americans go to sleep without health insurance coverage. They do so in fear of a nightmare scenario of developing a catastrophic illness and being unable to pay for treatment. It is this fear that has caused many hardworking Americans who are not covered by an employer or government-sponsored health care plan to purchase individual health insurance policies. But those Americans fortunate enough to afford individual health care coverage are not immune from the nightmare scenario. That's because of a practice called health insurance rescission. Here's what happened to one victim of rescission. Otto Raditz was a 59-year-old restaurant owner from Illinois who was diagnosed with an aggressive form of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a cancer of the immune system. He underwent intensive chemotherapy and was told that he had to have a stem cell transplant in order to survive. With coverage provided by his individual insurance policy, he was scheduled to have the procedure performed. But then his insurance company suddenly told him it was going to cancel his insurance coverage. Otto could not pay for the transplant without health insurance. The stem cell transplant surgery was canceled. The insurance company told him that it found when he applied for his insurance, he had not told the company about a test that had shown that he might have gallstones and an aneurysm, or weakness of the blood vessel wall. In fact, Otto's doctor had never told him about these test results. He didn't have any symptoms, and these conditions did not have anything to do with his cancer. But the insurance company was going to rescind his policy, effectively tearing up the contract as if it never happened, and it would not pay for his stem cell transplant. Otto made a desperate plea to the Illinois Attorney General's office seeking help to get his insurance company to reverse its decision. He told them, and I quote, "I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a matter of extreme urgency that I receive my transplant in 3 weeks. This is an urgent matter. Please help me so I can have my transplant scheduled. Any delay could threaten my life." The Illinois Attorney General's office launched an investigation, confirmed that Otto's doctor had never even told him about the test findings, and sent 2 letters to press the insurance company to reinstate his policy. The company relented, and Otto received his stem cell transplant. He was able to live 3 more years before passing away earlier this year. Otto was one of the lucky ones. This committee has concluded an investigation into the practice of health insurance rescission, and the results are alarming. Over the past 5 years, almost 20,000 individuals, insurance policy holders, have had their policies rescinded by 3 insurance companies who will testify today: Assurant, United Health Group, and WellPoint. From a review of case files, the committee has identified a variety of abuses by insurance companies, including conducting an investigation with an eye toward rescission in every case in which a policyholder submits a claim relating to leukemia, breast cancer, or any of a list of 1,400 serious or costly medical conditions. Rescinding policies based on an alleged failure to disclose a health condition entirely unrelated to the policyholder's current medical problem. Rescinding policies based on policyholders' failure to disclose a medical condition that their doctors never told them about. Rescinding policies based on innocent mistakes by policyholders in their applications. And rescinding coverage for all rescinding coverage for all members of a family based on a failure to disclose medical condition of one family member. The investigation has also found that at least one insurance company, WellPoint, evaluated employee performance based, in part, on the amount of money its employees saved the company through retroactive rescissions of health insurance policies. According to documents obtained by the committee, one WellPoint official was awarded a perfect score of 5 for exceptional performance based on having saved the company nearly $10 million through rescissions. These practices reveal that when an insurance company receives a claim for an expensive, life-saving treatment, some of them will look for a way, anyway, to avoid having to pay for it. This is eerily similar to what we found last year in our investigation of long-term care health insurance policies, where unscrupulous salespeople would sell policies to seniors, then change or revoke the policies once the enrollee was locked into a plan and making payments. The companies who engage in these rescission practices argue that they are entirely legal, and to an extent they are. But that goes against the whole point of insurance. When times are good, the insurance company is happy to sign you up and take your money in the form of premiums. But when times are bad and you're afflicted with cancer or some other life-threatening disease, it is supposed to honor its commitment and stand with you in your time of need. Instead, some of these companies use a technicality to justify breaking its promise at a time when patients are too weak to fight back. I'd also like to mention and compliment the staff on their supplemental information regarding the individual health insurance market. It's attached to my opening statement and will be part of the record. Today, we will hear from victims of this practice of rescissions, as well as 3 of the leading companies that engage in it. We hope to learn more about this problem so that we, in Congress, perhaps through a comprehensive national health care reform bill, can curb abuses and put an end to this unconscionable practice once and for all. I'd next like to turn to my ranking member, Mr. Walden from Oregon, for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I give my opening statement, I just want to clarify something. You indicated in your opening statement you do plan to put this supplemental information in the record. I thought you...
Yes, sir. I'm going to attach as part of my opening statement. This is the supplemental information regarding the individual health insurance market dated June 16th. I realize a lot of members haven't had time to look at it. I know they were putting it together last night. In the last couple of days, they went through about 50,000 pages, and it just helps members for questioning, so I wanted to put it in there because it is supplemental, and members can use it in questioning witnesses.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were saying then. I thought you told me you weren't going to put it in since the minority didn't see this until 9:20 this morning or 9.
Right, I wasn't going to put it in as part of the document binder, so I'll put it as part of my opening statement, and then it's attributable to me and the majority side and not the minority side, because as you had indicated, it's on committee stationery, and Mr. Barton had not had time to see it, so I did not want to say that Mr. Barton approved it, so I just made it part of my opening statement.
Okay. I appreciate that. I hope in the future we can work those things out in advance, as we have in most hearings in the past.
I agree.
Today's hearing is the second in a series of hearings investigating the individual health insurance market. Approximately 16 million Americans have individual health insurance policies. Once people apply and are issued their insurance cards, they breathe a sigh of relief and figure their health cares are covered. Unfortunately, that sigh of relief may turn into a frenzied panic if the Friday before the Monday a patient is to undergo a double mastectomy. She receives a call from her insurance company saying her insurance has been canceled and they'll no longer pay any claims. This is what happened to one of our witnesses here today, Ms. Robin Baton from Texas, Ranking Member Barton's constituent. We'll also hear from Mrs. Horton and Mrs. Raditz, where the threat or actual termination of insurance policies cause pain, frustration, and great expense. While we may be here to discuss valid uses for and procedural aspects of rescissions, medical underwriting, and other corporate practices, there are some actions we should no longer allow insurance companies to do. Playing gotcha with policyholders who have serious illnesses and huge expenses must stop. Insurance companies cannot wait until customers are sick or filing claims to verify their medical history and decide whether or not they want them as a customer. This is what they're supposed to be doing when they sign the member up. If the company does not conduct a review of unclear or incomplete information on the application, then the plan should not use subsequently acquired information as a basis for rescinding coverage. This practice is known as post-claims underwriting. The company should conduct its due diligence at the time the application is filled out and submitted prior to issuing coverage. Rescission should not be a license to find loopholes by investigating someone's medical history whenever they file a claim well after being accepted for coverage. Not if the company hurried through the application process. Not if the company blindly accepted most applicants. And not if the company gladly collected their money with no questions asked. This is inappropriate and it should be stopped. I understand that companies, just like the federal government, need ways to protect themselves from insurance fraud, which does occur. Some applicants willfully lie on the application to get insurance and pay lower premiums. This increases the cost of coverage for the insurers and other policyholders. When a company discovers this behavior and believes rescission is the appropriate action, the burden must rest on the insurer. The company should prove the insured failed to disclose material information that he or she was aware of at the time of the contract that would have resulted in different contracts altogether. After all, the company has the money, employees, and resources to meet that burden. They're the ones making the assertion, and they're the ones ultimately denying the coverage. It's not enough for companies just to send a letter to the insured stating that an investigation into their file has begun, and if they choose to, send in any additional information to the company. The company needs to attempt to communicate directly with the insured, his or her doctor, and review all pertinent information to prove the insured did make a material misstatement. The majority requested all case files that resulted in rescission in 2007 in 4 states. For United, this was 206 case files. For Assurant, this was 321 case files. And for WellPoint, this was 742 case files. To date, the committee has received more than 650 of these case files. My staff had the opportunity to review several of these files, including working all weekend. In some, there is a documentation or evidence that the insured intentionally withheld pertinent medical information that would have affected their coverage. In others, it's unclear whether the applicant was even aware of the condition or notation cited by an investigator in an old medical chart as evidence to rescind. Today, 3 individual policyholders will explain their stories and illustrate how they were unaware of conditions, symptoms, or other possible diagnoses that were written in a medical chart but never expressed to the patient. So you have to ask yourself, can a person make a material omission or a misstatement if he or she was not aware of a fact? I don't think so. But if I'm wrong, I want the companies to explain it to me. 2008 and 2009, these companies entered into settlement agreements with rescinded policy holders and providers in sums topping tens of millions of dollars. Some of the companies remain in litigation with other rescinded policy holders. I also recognize some of these companies have initiated internal reforms. These include steps to improve their application process, improve communication with the insured during the investigation and rescission process, and offer independent third-party review of rescission decisions if requested by the policyholder. I want to know what appropriate actions Congress can take and what else these companies can do better to ensure that all Americans have access to health care coverage. Health care reform is coming, and we need to have a better understanding of the individual health insurance market and its practices. We need to figure out first and foremost how to make quality health insurance affordable and reliable while keeping protections in place to combat insurance fraud. I hope that as this process moves forward, we work in a bipartisan way to design a system that achieves the ultimate goal of getting those who need medical care the attention they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walden. Mr. Waxman for an opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Today we're going to hear the results of a year-long congressional investigation into abuses in the individual insurance market. We began this investigation last year when I served as chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and we continued it this year with Chairman Stupak's leadership as the chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee of Energy and Commerce. As part of this investigation, we conducted a 50-state survey of insurance commissioners, and we sent document requests to some of the largest companies that offer individual health insurance. We received more than 116,000 pages of documents, and our staff talked with many policyholders who had their insurance policies canceled after they became ill. Some of them are here today to testify, and I thank them very much for being here. Overall, what we found is that the market for individual health insurance in the United States is fundamentally flawed. One of the biggest problems is that most states allow individual health insurance policies to deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. So if you lose your job and you can't qualify for a government program like Medicare or Medicaid, it's nearly impossible to get health insurance if you're sick or have an illness. This creates a perverse incentive. In the United States, insurance companies compete based on who is best at avoiding people who need life-saving health care. And this incentive manifests itself in a wide variety of controversial practices by the insurance companies. When we know that if people apply for insurance policies and they put down that they have some pre-existing condition, they're going to be denied. But what we found is that when people with individual policies become ill and then they submit their claims for expensive treatments, then insurance companies launch an investigation. They scour the policyholder's original insurance application and the person's medical records to find any discrepancy, any omission, or any misstatement that could allow them to cancel the policy. They try to find something, anything, so they can say that this individual was not truthful in that original application. It doesn't have to even relate to the medical care the person is seeking, and often it doesn't. You might need chemotherapy for lymphoma, but then when the insurance companies find that your coverage was based on a failure to disclose gallstones, well, they want to cancel your policy after the fact. It may come as a surprise to most people, but the insurance companies believe they are entitled to cancel the policies, even when these omissions or discrepancies are completely unintentional. And they believe that they have the right to cancel policies even when someone else, like an agent who sold the policy, was responsible for the discrepancy in the first place. In addition, they can terminate coverage not just for the primary policyholder, but they go to terminate the policies for the entire family, including innocent children who did nothing wrong. Some insurance companies launch these investigations every single time a policyholder becomes ill with a certain condition. In other words, if you happen to have ovarian cancer, you should be prepared to be investigated. It's the same with other conditions, such as leukemia. In the written statements for today, the three insurance companies downplay the significance of these practices, arguing that rescissions are relatively rare. But these three companies saved more than $300 million over the past 5 years as a result of rescissions. And I'm sure they view this amount as significant. More importantly, however, these terminations are extremely significant to the tens of thousands of people who needed health care and couldn't get it during these 5 years because their policies were rescinded. In my opinion, of course, the solution to these problems is to pass comprehensive health reform legislation. And based on the written testimony, I think the three insurance companies testifying here today agree with that assessment. But until that happens, insurance companies deny people coverage if they have a pre-existing condition, and then afterwards, if they gave them the coverage for insurance, they want to see if there's some reason they can rescind it after the fact, after they've already given out the insurance, to see if they can rescind that policy. I think it's shocking. It's inexcusable. It's a system that we have in place, and we've got to stop. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that you're holding this hearing, and I thank you for the time allotted to me.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. Mr. Barton, for opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my month for witnesses from Waxahachie, Texas. Last week, we had Mr. Frank Blankenbeckler, who's the owner of Carlisle Chevrolet in Waxahachie. Today, we have Ms. Robin Baton, who is a citizen of Waxahachie. So I want to extend to her the very best wishes and let her and the other two panelists on this first panel know that there's nothing to be afraid of. You speak for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of American citizens, and the country is very interested through the auspices of this hearing to hear your story. So we appreciate all three of you being here. This is an important hearing. It addresses part of the need to reform our health care system. We're going to hear today about a problem under the current system that can occur in the handling of individual health insurance policies when claims are actually submitted for coverage under those policies. As I just said, I want to extend a warm welcome to our first panel of witnesses. Each of you has a personal story that you wish to share, and we know that it's a story that is worth hearing. We also know that it takes courage to testify, and as I just said, there's nothing to be afraid of at this hearing today. We hear of problems as congressmen and women when our constituents tell us what those problems actually are. Today, we're going to hear from one of my constituents, Ms. Robin Baton. No one should have to go through what she's had to go through the last several years. In June of last year, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer, and her doctor said that she needed immediate surgery. The Friday before the Monday that she was to undergo a double mastectomy, she received a letter from her carrier, Blue Cross of Texas, that rescinded her insurance policy. The letter stated that the company would not pay for the surgery. The letter further informed Ms. Baton that an investigation into her claim for benefits when the company had thoroughly reviewed her medical records that she submitted when she applied for the coverage, and that they discovered that she had misinformed them on several pieces of information. One of them was that she didn't list her weight accurately, and the other that she failed to disclose some medication that she had taken for a pre-existing heart condition. The record will show that she was not taking that medication at the time that she submitted her initial application for coverage. Robin's claim in June of 2008 was not for weight control. It was not for a heart condition. It was for cancer surgery, a double mastectomy for breast cancer. Yet her policy was rescinded 3 days before that surgery was scheduled to take place. It was bad enough that she had to deal with the trauma of breast cancer, but to be denied coverage right before potentially life-saving surgery, quite frankly, is something that no human being should have to undergo. She had no insurance and no way to pay for her scheduled surgery, so obviously it was postponed. She called my office, my staff went to work. They had several conference calls with officials of Blue Cross Blue Shield. In those conference calls, the Blue Cross and Blue Shield was unyielding. They were adamant. It went to the council, the general counsel of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and that individual said there was no way they were going to reinstate her coverage. Never take no for an answer. I called the president of Blue Cross Blue Shield. I appealed to him personally, gave him the facts as I knew them, and he promised that he would personally investigate Mrs. Baton's case. And he further promised that if the facts were as she said and I said, that her coverage would be reinstated. Good to his word, the president called me back within 4 hours and said that Ms. Baton's coverage would be reinstated. However, precious time was lost. Luckily for Robin, she was finally able to get the surgery, not through Blue Cross Blue Shield, though, as I understand it. She's now undergoing chemotherapy because the cancer has spread to her lymph nodes, but she is still with us, thank God, and she's here today to tell us her personal story. Robin's situation was what caused me to draft an amendment to Representative DeLauro's breast cancer bill last year to protect people like Robin by prohibiting rescissions of health insurance if non-disclosure of information is not related to the claim. Not related to the claim and inadvertent. There is no reason on God's green earth that somebody ought to have their health insurance revoked because of some inadvertent admission that's not related to the claim that's being submitted to the health insurance company. This bill, with my amendment, passed the House last year, but it died in the Senate. It's been reintroduced, and hopefully it will pass this year. I support the right of an applicant to request a third-party independent review of an insurer's rescission prior to pending or denying payments of claims. I understand that there's another side to the story. I understand that there are people that do try to scam insurance companies. I understand that there is a rule of reason, but again, if somebody inadvertently omits something or there's something that's not material to the claim, that claim, in my opinion, should be paid. End of story. As we head towards reforming health care, it is important that we promote honesty on behalf of the insured and the insurers. Congress needs to be confident that there are consumer protections in place to protect people like Robin Baton, as well as procedures for companies to protect themselves from insurance fraud. Companies need to have open and clear rules on when they terminate policies. Applicants need to be truthful when applying for coverage. Every American, and this is something that members on both sides of the aisle supports, needs to have access to affordable, quality health care. This is an important hearing towards that goal, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for holding it. I also think that we should give special consideration to one of our panelists here on the dais. The gentlelady from Chicago injured herself yesterday and has a broken leg, and yet she is here today at this health care hearing. So we appreciate Ms. Schakowsky being here.
If the chairman would, and fortunately with good health insurance, so I'm happy about that too.
So anyway, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, and thank you again in helping us obtain witnesses for this hearing. Mr. Dingell for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you for holding this hearing on the rather vicious practice of post-claims underwriting and the detrimental effect that such practices have on hundreds of Americans. And I want to thank the witnesses for appearing in what I hope will be an informative hearing today on which the committee may begin some actions to correct what appears to be a very serious abuse. And I remember, Mr. Barton, the way we worked together on this in your outrage last year when we were addressing similar questions. Healthcare costs have risen sharply. In response to this, insurance providers have taken drastic measures to reduce costs and to improve profit margins. Unfortunately, the health insurance industry has attempted to do so by giving in to unscrupulous industry practice, including the practice of post-claims underwriting. I want to be clear. I have no sympathy for individuals who intentionally misrepresent their health status in the applications they submit for health insurance coverage. These actions are dishonest and have a negative impact on the cost of health care for everyone else, and they are clearly wrongdoing that should be punished. However, I have far less sympathy for health care providers and insurance providers who have made it a customary practice to exploit current laws meant to protect individuals and to take advantage of the most vulnerable Americans in order to turn a profit. They do this by seeing to it that they avoid risk as opposed to practicing good insurance practices. As we've seen time and time again, insurance providers have made a living out of refusing to compete on quality and choosing instead to compete by avoiding financial obligations at all costs. In the current market, health insurance providers are allowed to pick and choose whom they will cover in the individual market. We've allowed this cherry picking or cream skimming to go on for years. But when we weren't looking, the industry decided to up the ante. In some cases, industry underwrote countless claims for individuals it cherry-picked, and then it began to quietly punish those individuals if they got sick and used their insurance for its intended purpose, to cover major medical claims. In some cases, industry didn't just drop the individual policyholder, but retroactively rescinded the contract as if the agreement had failed to exist. They refused to pay hospitals, doctors, and nurses that sought reimbursement for services rendered. To our witnesses who are appearing this morning to share their personal experience with post-claims underwriting, we will work to ensure these practices come to a sharp end. To the CEOs testifying this morning, I would like them to know this. We don't regulate for the fun of it. We regulate when the private sector refuses to honor its commitments to the American public. As we work to reform the nation's health care system, we will work to reform the current health insurance market. We will work to ensure such reform will prohibit insurers from excluding pre-existing conditions or engaging in any other unfair and discriminatory practice. We will also work to ensure these reforms include fair grievance and appeals mechanisms, very much lacking in the insurance world today, and will ensure information transparency and plan disclosure. These new reforms alone will not fix the problems. We will also have to work to ensure that there is strong oversight on both the federal and state level. Furthermore, these insurance industry practices are precisely the reason why we need a public health insurance option included in our proposal to reform the health care system, a public plan that leads by example and competes through quality and innovation rather than unfair industry practices is what is needed to keep the private industry in the insurance business honest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dingell. Next, for a 3-minute opening statement, Mr. Gingrey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Generally, insurance is a form of risk management that allows individuals to pay a monthly premium in exchange for a company taking on their financial risk in the event of a health care catastrophic loss. Health insurance, on the other hand, is not typical insurance. For a monthly premium, individuals purchase health insurance to financially support them in the event of a catastrophic incident, such as a broken leg, as the lady from Chicago just recently experienced, or major surgery. Patients also use their insurance for such things as doctor visits or monthly prescriptions. In many respects, health insurance has become the means by which patients see their providers and they receive treatment. Primary responsibility for regulating the individual health insurance market rests with the state regulators. However, in the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, HIPAA, Congress made very clear that an individual insurance policyholder has a right to guaranteed renewability. In other words, an insurer must renew or continue an individual's existing coverage unless some specific exception is met. Those exceptions include a policyholder moving out of a network plan service area, or if the policyholder intentionally misrepresents material facts concerning their condition when contracting with the insurer. I believe it is unfair for an individual to be denied coverage for a claim when he or she has been upfront about their condition. They're played by the rules of the contract. They're paid their premiums on a regular, timely basis, only to be denied coverage when a health care incident arises. As described by my colleague, Mr. Walden, what we would call post-claims underwriting. The impact it has on patients and their loved ones can be devastating. I have actually personally experienced that in my own family, and it literally took an act of Congress to change that. With these thoughts in mind, I look forward to the testimonies of our witnesses today. I want to thank the entire panel, this first panel particularly, as well as the second panel, for coming in today and sharing your stories with us. And Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the hearing and to the questions, and at this time I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Green of Texas for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think all of us appreciate you calling this hearing today because, like my ranking member from Texas talked about, we deal with this all the time through our constituents, and as a state legislator in Texas, we've had that same problem for many years, and I appreciate you bringing us out, and hopefully we'll address this in our health care reform. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Most individuals in the country have health insurance through their employer, Medicare or Medicaid, but millions of Americans do not have insurance through their employers or through the public market, so they turn to the individual insurance market to purchase insurance policy. Individuals who purchase the insurance through the individual market must go through an application process and supply their medical history, including any mental, physical, or chronic conditions. Insurance companies are supposed to review those applications and review the applicant's medical history before approving the individual for coverage. Oftentimes, this medical history review never occurs, and the insurance companies will cover individuals who have conditions they would not necessarily cover. These individuals believe their coverage, and when it's current, and when they submit a claim, they often find themselves subject to that medical history investigation and drop from their insurance and liable for all claims under the policy. In other instances, individuals submit a claim for a serious illness, such as cancer, and find themselves subject to a medical history investigation and drop from their policy because the insurance company claims the individual did not disclose a medical condition when filling out their initial application. Both these instances leave the individual without health insurance coverage and uninsurable because they have to report having their coverage rescinded. Individuals who are undergoing medical treatment for conditions such as cancer or dropped from their coverage often face life and death situations because the insurance company does not want to pay for their treatments. I can't imagine the pain and suffering these individuals go through at the expense of an industry seeking healthy patients to make a profit. A few states, including Texas, have taken actions to prevent insurance companies from post-claims underwriting. As we're working through health reform, we need to examine the individual market and ensure individuals never have to face losing their coverage for simply using their coverage. And, Mr. Chairman, again, I thank you for calling this hearing. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Burgess for 3 minutes opening statement, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the consideration. Let me just say at the outset, I do believe in the individual market. I believe it has a place in this country. Indeed, I was a client and a customer in the individual market for my family's coverage for a period of time. And I also believe that the barriers that we, the federal government, the Congress puts in place on the individual market sometimes creates unnecessary difficulties for the people who sell in the individual market and the people who wish to be their customers. But no one can defend, and I certainly cannot defend the practice of denying coverage after the fact. And I cannot be comforted by the fact or the statements that are made that this is, in fact, an infrequent occurrence, because as the cases in front of us at the table, at the witness table, demonstrate this morning, there is no acceptable minimum to denying coverage after the fact when the coverage was duly paid for and entered into in an honest fashion, and then only when the coverage was required was it found to be not there. Now, I don't think anyone on either side of the dais believes that anyone would ever lie about something on a medical history, maybe fudge weight a little bit, maybe the number of times we actually go to the gym or what we actually do there, but no one would willfully do that. But the question before us today is, do people intentionally lie in order to manipulate companies into giving them coverage when they know that they have a pre-existing condition? And the legal jargon that we apply to that is rescission. And should insurance companies, post-procedure, be allowed to terminate individual contracts based upon the omission of disclosure of a pre-existing condition, irrespective of whether there was intent on behalf of the individual seeking coverage or not? And I'm troubled by that inability to distinguish between those who intentionally act with fraud and those who honestly answer broad, vague, or confusing questions on the contracts to obtain health coverage. Those are not equivalent conditions. An omission without intent does not signify fraud, and no insurance company who hides behind filling out their request for insurance as a strict liability should be protected. Intent is crucial because those who act fraudulently should not be protected by the law, nor should it be our desire to do so. It is interesting to me that all of the insurance companies today that we're going to hear from on our panel today are private for-profit companies. But Ms. Beaton's insurer, whose case proved near intractable until her member of Congress got involved, was Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I wonder, Mr. Chairman, why Blue Cross and Blue Shield is not in one of our panels today. Clearly, as a nonprofit company, they would not have a purely profit-driven motive to engage in this type of behavior. So theirs is perhaps particularly curious, and I think there are a number of questions that we would like to pose to a company that does in fact function as a nonprofit. You know, and it's the responsibility of each insurance company, whether for-profit or not-for-profit, to do their due diligence before the contracts are entered into and not use rescission as an excuse for lazy or incomplete underwriting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Ms. Sutton for opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman Stupak, for holding this critical hearing. Simply put, rescission of coverage by insurance companies puts dollars ahead of the lives of Americans. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that insurance company accountability is something that I have fought and advocated for at every stage of my professional life. During my time as a representative in the Ohio General Assembly, I worked on behalf of Ohioans to ensure that when benefits were promised, benefits were given. And now I'm here in Congress to continue that fight. Rescission of coverage is a problem that we in Congress are seeking to eliminate, and it's our hope, you've heard from the comments here, that when we have finished reforming our health care system, coverage discrimination will be a thing of the past. But today, it's still a problem that exists and must be eliminated. When a health insurance policy rescission occurs, it creates waves throughout the entire health care system. Make no mistake, these decisions deprive people of needed care. They deprive hospitals and doctors of the reimbursement they have earned for their service. For some, a rescission is a costly process that can result in a doctor or hospital having to seek payment from the individual. For others, it means a delay in access to a life-saving procedure or treatment. That is unacceptable. Today we will hear from citizens, and I thank you all for coming to provide your testimony and your stories about your lives that have been turned upside down by the insurance industry policy of rescission. We'll hear from executives who will tell us that in the name of uncovering insurance fraud and corruption, they had no choice but to remove these beneficiaries from their roles. But I think the testimony of the people who have lived through this trauma will tell a different story. The number of uninsured in this country is now thought to be 47 million. It's a major flaw in our country that so many people go without their basic right to have health care coverage, and millions more who have insurance still don't get the care they need when they need it. It's hard to understand how we allow those who are legitimately covered to join the ranks of the uninsured due to the stroke of a pen or the decision of an insurance company executive. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I have another hearing that is going on simultaneously with this one, so I'll be shuttling back and forth. But I want the panelists to know that I will be listening carefully to the testimony, both for myself and for the people of Ohio that I am so honored to represent. And I thank you all again for coming, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton, and that's a good reminder. Members will be coming back and forth as there's a committee 2 floors up. Telecommunications Internet Subcommittee is also meeting. And in that vein, Congresswoman Donna M. Christensen, who's a member of this subcommittee, has submitted her opening statement for the record. Without objection, it will be entered into the record. Next, I'd turn to Ms. Schakowsky for an opening statement, please. And you can tell us how you broke your leg.
Well, I wish there was a dramatic story, Mr. Chairman, although it was in a fairly dramatic place. I did go to Guantanamo Bay yesterday and fell and ended up breaking my foot in two places. I hope soon, with the help of the attending physicians, I'll have a boot or a cast or something. That was just yesterday.
Well, we wish you well. Thanks for being here.
And I am grateful that I do have good health insurance to cover that. I appreciate today's hearing examining one of the truly egregious practices occurring in the individual health insurance market. I want to extend a special welcome to Ms. Peggy Raditz from my home state, from LaGrange. I thank you for being here and sharing your family's story with us. I know it isn't always easy to discuss personal matters, but you certainly are helping us to make better health care policies, and I thank the witnesses for helping us. When a consumer goes to buy a health insurance policy, they examine their options and they try to identify the best policy to meet the health care needs of their family, and at no time do they ever imagine that once they buy a policy, they might get sick and their insurance will simply rescind their policy and leave them without coverage, but with a high pile of bills. The practice of post-claims underwriting in the private market is wrong, and we should prohibit it. Let's face it, it's already hard enough for an individual or small business owner to find health insurance. In my state of Illinois, there is no requirement that insurers take all comers, and I've heard from constituents over and over again who are unable to find a policy really at any price. Those who do get through the insurance industry gauntlet know that they're not home free. They know they may face high out-of-pocket costs, denial of doctor-prescribed treatments, prior approval requirements, caps on services, and other devices that are designed to limit the insurance company payments. But few know that when they need care, the insurance company has been collecting their premiums may now go back and comb through their personal history in order to find an excuse not to pay just when the policyholder needs the coverage the most. There are some who argue that rescissions are used to stop fraud on the part of enrollees who misrepresent their health histories in order to obtain coverage. One has to wonder why we would put up with a health care system in which people have to hide their illnesses in order to get access to care. But we also know that this isn't about that. It's about a company. It's most often about a company looking for an undisclosed headache 10 years ago in order to deny coverage for a brain tumor today. The practice of the private insurance market have less to do with the consumer and a lot to do with company profits. As we move forward with health care reform, we have to put an end to practices that discourage patients from seeking out care. Insurance coverage should be a pathway, not a barrier to care. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you to improve care coverage, refocus our attention on patients, and I really, again, thank our witnesses for being here today, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Braley for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very important hearing, but I'd like to start by talking about the very concept that we're here to discuss, because the term post-claims underwriting is an oxymoron. Insurance companies are structured into different departments. They have an underwriting department and a claims department. And the underwriting department is supposed to do pre-issuance risk assessment to determine whether an individual policy is worth the company investing in that person as a health care risk. The claims department is designed to respond to requests for coverage after a policy has been issued. So the very theory we're here to talk about today isn't even supposed to exist in a rational healthcare delivery system. And it wouldn't exist if we had a rational healthcare delivery system. But when you read news stories where the CEO of one private health insurance company is sitting on stock options valued at $1.6 billion, it shouldn't come as a shock to any of us that we're sitting here today hearing these horror stories of patients who've been caught up in an inefficient, unsustainable private health insurance delivery system. And Ms. Raditz, I wish that every claims examiner at every insurance company and every underwriter who gets engaged in post-claims underwriting determinations had to go through what you went through and the other witnesses who are here today. Because one of the most profound experiences I've had in my life was spending about a month at a pediatric oncology unit at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics when I was in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program and my little brother was diagnosed with acute large cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and spend time every day watching young patients with no hair, with IVs in their arms or in their chest going into a port, walking around and taking care of each other much better than our healthcare industry takes care of patients in their time of need. And it's a slander on the names of the healthcare professionals who do everything they can to keep patients like your brother, like my little brother, alive when we don't give them the support that they need after they have invested their hard-earned dollars by paying premiums to a healthcare insurance company who turns their back on the patient in their hour of need. And that's why I'm a strong supporter of the public health insurance option, and I'm proud that my colleagues on this committee, Chris Murphy and Peter Welch, have joined me in introducing the Choices Bill to give health insurance patients a public health insurance option with no discrimination so we don't have to go through these nightmares anymore. And with that, I yield back.
Well, thank you, and that concludes the opening statements of all members. One of our witnesses had to step out just for a moment, so let's stand in recess for just 5 minutes, and we'll come right back in about 5 minutes, okay? Give everyone a chance to stretch their leg. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes.